So are you saying the Smithsonian hides evidence of giants?
The story is always the same. This guy's digging and finds these giant bones, calls the Smithsonian. They come over, they investigate, they take the bones, they go back, and then it disappears. Much later, the Dead Sea Scrolls are found. And then among the thousands of parchment, there's the Book of Enoch. That title sounds cute until you read it and you realize he's talking about really Adam and Eve. The CIA was so interested in the Book of Adam and Eve is because it describes the end of the world.
Let's dive into the giants.
Giants are fun, and where do you want to start? The beginning?
Yeah.
Giants are in every culture's history. Every culture's got giants mentioned. Ancient Indian Vedas, Native Americans, island of Malta, East Asian, every culture has giants. And the Bible, of course. Epic of Gilgamesh. So giants show up all through our culture. And whenever I see that, a lot of what I do is just pattern recognition. Like I wasn't even really a flood myth guy until I started doing my show. And it's like, this flood story keeps showing up over and over, no matter what I'm talking about. The flood myth shows up and it's always showing up at the same time as like the end of the Younger Dryas, like these things, it's just the same pattern over and over. Maybe it's a coincidence, but if one culture has a story about a flood, then they have a story. If two cultures have it, it could be a coincidence. But if you get 40 or 300, then maybe there's something to it. Maybe it really happened. So I'm pretty sure that flood happened. Now, as for giants is tricky because we don't have any hard evidence, but we have a lot of circumstantial evidence where the most recent would probably be late 19th century, early 20th, where you just had these discoveries all over America, over 1,000 of them, of these amateur archaeologists finding giant bones. And the story is always the same. Is this guy's he's digging and he's like desecrating a Native American burial mound, finds these giant bones, calls the Smithsonian. They come over, they investigate, they take the bones, they go back, and then it disappears. Like that happens over and over through these stories. Is the Smithsonian conspiracies always involve? But
So are you saying the Smithsonian hides evidence of giants?
I'm saying that the conspiracy theory is that the Smithsonian hides evidence of a lot of things. The Smithsonian, of which I'm a huge fan of. Like if I go to DC, I spend 4 days there. I love the museum part. But what we don't see is we don't see the kind of the dark underside of the Smithsonian. Like when it was formed.
Like the Vatican.
The Vatican. We can talk about that too. The Smithsonian, I think the first director might have been John Wesley Powell. I could be fact checked on that. Who was he spent a lot of time with Native Americans. He respected them. He saw them as very intelligent and resourceful. So they were well represented in the Smithsonian. But then he appointed, I forget the gentleman's name, but he was like the chief ethnographer for the East Ohio or something like this, some crazy title. And he gets into a position of power, and it turns out that he sees Native cultures Native Americans as not as subhuman. He called them specimens. He would put like their body parts on display and stuff. Look at these Native American specimens. So there'd be all these discoveries of these amazing mounds, like the Serpent Mound in Ohio, and all this stuff all around the country. And the Smithsonian would say there must have been another advanced race here because Native Americans are they're savages. They couldn't never build this. And that became kind of embedded in the Smithsonian for a long, long time. Is this isolationist theory is what they called it, where before it was called diffusionism, where diffusionism was cultures from all around the world interacted. But then the new regime came in and said there's no way that Native Americans from the Mississippian culture could interact with the Mayas or the Incas. They were too savage to do that, which is ridiculous. That's like, saying that Carthage didn't have anything to do with Rome. Of course they did. And we've learned later that some of the biggest, most advanced cities in the world of the ancient world were here in America. Like the city of Cahokia was a Mississippian culture. It was bigger than London. It was bigger than Paris. It was like a big advanced civilization that just got kind of covered over. And so the Smithsonian just sort of had this worldview that they're just locked into it. And I think we see a lot of that with pseudoscience, pseudo-archaeology. If it doesn't fit the mainstream narrative, then you're marginalized, you're censored. Again, Graham Hancock, when Ancient Apocalypse came out, it was called the most dangerous series on Netflix because it was white supremacy and all this crazy stuff.
White supremacy?
Because if it's an advanced civilization that was here before us, the implication is that it was white, when he never says anything like that. He never says anything like that. He's married to a woman of color. So it's infuriating. Because he took a lot of heat for that show.
I love that show.
Of course. And you don't have to believe all of it. And I don't subscribe to everything he does, but I'm fascinated by the topics. And we can get back to giants in a second. I'm just trying to set up that there are forces that want to keep certain things away from us. Mm-hmm. There's an initiative right now to have the Smithsonian catalog and make public everything they have there, which I don't think is going anywhere. The Smithsonian gets very strange carve-outs of laws. There was a law passed not too long ago which required all museums to return anything that was of value to Native American cultures back to the tribes, especially if it was funeral, anything that have to do like funeral, whatever it's called, death rites or whatever, to return all that stuff. So this law is passed, the museums have to do all that, but specifically it says in line after line, Smithsonian is exempt. Smithsonian doesn't count. Smithsonian doesn't have to do any of this. So they don't have to respond to any of it. So then we go back to Grand Canyon or the giants, and we don't really know. It's hard to know what's true because there's over 1,000 reports in newspapers of these findings. But the mainstream narrative is it was giants were cool at the time, and it was hoaxes, and it was just to make money. But it's just too many coincidences. And there's one giant story that's interesting because it overlaps several cultures, native cultures, where you've got in like the Mississippi Valley, they have these Indian myths about these giants they're cannibals. So they're eating the people, and they get driven west by the tribes. They unite and drive them west into like Nevada and California. And they end up at what's known as Lovelock Cave. And the Lovelock Cave giants are famous giants. They're the red-haired giants. So the story goes that they're at war with all these tribes. And during the war, when the natives are falling, they're like eating them in the battlefield. So it unites the tribes, and they drive them into Lovelock Cave, and they seal the cave, and they set fire to the whole place. And an archaeologist goes in there and finds sandals that are like size 29 and these giant clothes that, like, I'm not making this part up. You can go see this. Like, why is there a sandal that's this size that are all found in the cave, and bones and red hair? But, and all that stuff has been sent back, and then it's just gone.
Managing a household, especially with kids, is no small feat. I totally get it, and that's why I've made sure my family has a plan in place if something unexpected ever happens. But what about you? Do you have a plan to help protect your family's financial future? Don't worry. Fabric by Gerber Life can help. Fabric by Gerber Life is term life insurance you can get done today. Made for busy parents like you, all online, on your schedule, right from your couch. You could be covered in under 10 minutes with no health exam required. Fabric has flexible, high-quality policies that fit your family and your budget, like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. Fabric also has free digital wills, tools to invest in your kids' future, and more, all right from your phone. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/srclips. That's meetfabric.com/srclips. meetfabric.com/srclips. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions.
And as recently as just maybe like 20 years ago, at some point, someone discovered these giant coffins with lids on them, and they were sent to the Smithsonian.
Was there anything in the coffin?
Not that I'm aware of, but they were coffins, and they were big. And native cultures didn't do that. They didn't have coffins or bury their dead. At least none that I'm aware of. That was not part of their culture. So this was very strange. So those were sent to the Smithsonian, and then it kind of disappeared. But then, not too long ago, someone picked up on the story and asked the Smithsonian about them, and they said, "We do have record of receiving that, but we don't know where they are." And that was kind of the end of it. And then a few years later, someone else got involved. I think it was John Tierney. John Tierney really went after Smithsonian hard. He wrote a book about like Smithsonian is the greatest cover-up. So it might have been Tierney that he said, "Okay, I know that you said you received these. You can't find them. I need you to find them." And they said, "Okay, we found them. But they're in a warehouse it's got an asbestos problem. So no one could go in there." And he said, "Well, when can we go in there?" And they said, "About 10 years. And that was really the last of it. So the Smithsonian gets wrapped up in all these weird conspiracies. There's the Acambaro statues, which is very controversial, which is like 3,000 artifacts that show humans riding dinosaurs. They show Asians, Africans, races that shouldn't be around there, that are carbon dated to 2,500 years ago, 3,500 years ago. And they're sent to Smithsonian. The Smithsonian said, "Yeah, these things are 30 years old. They're a hoax." But they were independently validated by other labs saying, "No, these things are really, really old." Smithsonian's like, "Nah, it's a hoax." And then as time goes on, all those other labs become discredited, like, "Oh, their techniques weren't modern." And that's kind of where the Acambaro has ended up, as far as I know. Because I don't know if anyone really cares enough to follow up on stuff like that. I do. So I kind of want to know, like, what do you have down there? I think they have almost 1 billion artifacts that we can't see. And I just want to know what they are. So all those giant bones that were found, okay, I'm sure 99% of them are hoaxes. And maybe there's a 0.5% that were mastodon bones that were misidentified. But what happened in Lovelock Cave? We know stuff was in there because there was a tribal leader, a woman who became kind of a famous author. She had red hair woven into like some of her traditional garb. And she said it's from the Lovelock Giants. Like, where did she get that red hair? So I'm not saying it's real. I'm just saying I would like to know what's the chain of custody there. So there's just a lot of those.
I mean, this all came from biblical stuff, though, correct?
Yeah. So the biblical giants, you don't see much of them in the canonical Bible. The Nephilim are mentioned once, and I could talk about them a little bit. But we learn more about giants when the Book of Enoch is discovered. And the Book of Enoch was discovered when, like, an adventurer, I forget when it was, maybe 18th century, was looking for the source of the Nile River, which was kind of a big deal at the time. And he found it. And it was somewhere in Ethiopia. And he gets to know the locals there, and they're Ethiopian Jews that have been there for 3,000 years. So he's friendly with them. They take him up to their, whatever you call it, their church, and he sees this giant book. What's like a giant book? What's that? He said, "That's the Bible." He said, "Oh, it's a Bible?" They said, No, that's the Bible. When the King James Bible, I don't know how many books it is, like 66 or something like that, where this had over 100 books. And in there were Book of Enoch, the Book of Giants, all this other stuff. So you have Genesis that starts, basically let there be light. But in this expanded Bible, you have all this stuff that happened before then. So we know a little bit about Moses from the Bible, but if you read these other books, you learn all about Moses and Enoch and Methuselah, and these men are all related, and going back this like 10 or 12 generations from Adam, it's all in there. And this kind of ties in with the pseudo-archaeology and how mainstream wants you to stay in your lane. So this book is discovered, and they've had this for thousands of years. There's the story of the Queen of Sheba. There's only a little bit about her in the main Bible, but this expanded Bible has the Queen of Sheba going up to meet King Solomon, and she's fascinated by him, and they fall in love, and she gives him a child named Menelik, and that ties into the Ark of the Covenant and all that stuff. So we have that one story, but it's kind of an outlier. It's Ethiopian Jews, which is kind of strange, but legitimate. But then much later, the Dead Sea Scrolls are found, and then among the thousands of parchment there's the Book of Enoch, copies and copies of it, and the Book of Giants. So the story is that there's these sky gods. And this story, for people who know it, is going to track exactly with the Anunnaki. It's going to track right with it. This Bible story is going to track right with it. So you've got these sky gods, and they send watchers down to Earth. And their job is to shepherd and guide humans, teach them animal husbandry and agriculture and all that stuff. But the watchers become corrupt and fascinated with human women. And Hecklefish says, oh, that's not going to end well. And it didn't. So the watchers, who are probably angels, they interbreed with humans, and then their offspring are the Nephilim. And the Nephilim are they're giants. In some books, they're 350 feet tall. They're vicious. They're violent. They're cannibals. And these are the unholy offspring of the angels and humans.
Is it angels and humans or demons and humans?
In the earlier books, what's the difference? I don't think the books really take a stance, because the Watchers are there with good intentions. But I think there's lessons in all of that anyone could be corrupted. Certainly, Persian women are pretty enough. So the giants now they're ravaging the world, and they're just making a mess of things. And that's when God decides it's got to stop. We got to start over. And then he wipes it away with the flood. But the Book of Enoch expands on all of that and has Enoch going up to heaven to speak to God. And that's heresy to say, because heaven's not supposed to be a place. Like, mortal man can't go to heaven and certainly can't come back, but Enoch did. And he was specifically taken there. I think he was taken there by Uriel and taken up there in a chariot of fire. And then Enoch is walking around heaven, but he's describing a place where he's seeing tall beings of light going about their business, and the walls are covered with how he describes as emeralds that are just blinking lights on and off. And he talks about how he can see all of the earth, and he describes how he can see how the winds are made, and I can see every lake and river on the earth. And when you think of heaven, you think of clouds in the sky, but Enoch said that there's a roof, there's a ceiling, and everything is shiny. And what it sounds like he's describing is a spacecraft, if you read the book. Like, if you read the book through a modern lens, it's like, this guy is on a UFO, is where Enoch is. So he's up there, and they take him all around the cosmos. And this is all in the book. He describes the solar system, and he's told the Earth goes around the sun in 364 days, which we weren't supposed to know any of that then in the Book of Enoch. And then he's given a directive from God to go take this message down to the Nephilim and the Watchers that, if you don't get your shit together, it's going to get bad down here. And they ignore the order, and that's when the flood comes. And then only one man is chosen to survive the flood, and that's Enoch's grandson, and that's Noah. And that's where the Noah's Ark story comes from. But it tracks pretty closely with the Anunnaki story and the Cataclysm, and it tracks a little bit with the Epic of Gilgamesh and Utnapishtim and the flood there, and a lot of these other stories.
Wow, that's fascinating.
I think so.
Didn't the Smithsonian cover up Adam and Eve or something?
Are you talking about the Adam and Eve book?
Yes.
Oh, that's a different one. That's so that's a book. It was released in 1966 by Dr. Chan Thomas, and it's called The Story of Adam and Eve. And that story title sounds cute until you read it and you realize he's talking about really Adam and Eve. And the story is it's this 278-page manuscript that is classified by the CIA, and they've removed 200 pages. There's only like 50 or 60 pages left, and half of those are blank. And the CIA says it's been sanitized. And the reason that the CIA was so interested in the book of Adam and Eve is because it describes the end of the world. And Dr. Thomas in the book talks about pole shifts and what happens when the poles shift. Something happens to the inner core of the Earth, our electrical field gets thrown off, and when that happens, the poles shift, and it's something that happens over and over and over again. And his pole shift is a 90-degree shift, so Antarctica goes to the equator, and the equator goes down south. Like it's violent. And as it's shifting, the atmosphere continues to rotate, west to east. So that he describes in the book just walls of water and this wind and debris just tearing across everything. Cities are reduced to waste. He says New York, Boston, Chicago, LA are nothing but memories. New York is at the bottom of the sea. And Antarctica is at the equator and becomes, like a tropical land. And the story is the CIA wanted this suppressed because it would cause chaos and all of that. And that was a story that was recommended that I cover. And it was one that I got a lot of people angry at me because I debunked all of it. I debunked the whole thing. That it was never 287 pages or whatever. It was just 50, 60 pages. And it was never classified. What happened was, and they said Chan Thomas was a fake name, but it's not. His name is Dr. Chauncey Powers. Chauncey Powers Thomas. And the book was never classified. What happened was he was an engineer at McDonnell Douglas working on anti-gravity and missile guidance and kind of some weird stuff like that. And his coworkers said he's very intelligent, but he's kind of eccentric. And what I believe happened, because I found the CIA file on him, is they've got the book, but there's also like People magazine, and there's a shopping list, and there's these like random documents. And I think it was just, he's working on this like top secret stuff. He's wacky. They probably had just an officer just keeping an eye on him.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.